The Galactic Military Academy sat on a world called Prime. It was the most famous military school in all the known galaxy. For 3,000 years, the greatest warriors from hundreds of alien species had trained within its walls. The buildings were made of white stone that never got dirty. The training field stretched for miles in every direction. Ships from 100 different worlds filled the sky above, bringing new cadets who dreamed of glory. Sergeant Major stood at the front of the parade ground. He was which meant he looked something like a giant insect. He had 6 legs, a hard shell the color of dark bronze, and compound eyes that could see in every direction at once. He had trained soldiers for 40 years. He had seen every species in the Confederacy pass through these gates. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. The new class of cadets stood in perfect rows before him. There were 47 of them this year. Looked at them with the cold eye of a teacher who expected most of them to fail. He saw a prince from the hegemony, a species of 4-armed predators with silver skin. He saw twin sisters from the sovereignty, their bodies covered in beautiful feathers of blue and gold. He saw the heir to the crystal mines, his chest decorated with gems worth more than some planets. These were the children of power, the sons and daughters of empires. They wore their badges with great pride. Each badge was made of precious metals and rare stones. Each one told a story of ancient civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Then saw her. She stood in the back row. She was not tall. She was not young. Gray hair mixed with black on her head, and lines marked her face in ways that spoke of age and hard living. While the other cadets wore shining armor and carried themselves like royalty, she wore simple gray clothes that looked like they had been washed 1,000 times. But it was the badge on her chest that made stop breathing. It was a small disc made of bronze. The bronze had turned green and brown with rust. On its face was a simple image of a planet with one moon. Knew that image. Every being in the galaxy knew it. Earth the human. The instructor felt his mandibles click together in disgust. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only discovered how to travel between stars about 100 years ago. They came from a death world, a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there for even one day. They were considered primitive, backwards, a joke. And now one of them had somehow gotten into his academy. Walked toward her. The other cadets parted to let him through. He saw them smiling. He heard them whispering. Good. Let them see how he dealt with this mistake. Cadet, he said, stopping in front of her. You appear to have made a navigation error. The remedial training facility is 3 systems in that direction. Laughter filled the parade ground. The prince, whose name was, laughed loudest of all. He leaned toward his friends and spoke in a voice meant to be heard. They are letting Terrans in now. I thought this was a military academy, not a charity program for primitives. More laughter. The twins covered their beaks with their wing hands, giggling. Even some of the instructors smiled. The human woman did not react. She simply stood there looking at with brown eyes that held no anger, no shame, no fear. She looked at him the way a person might look at rain falling outside a window, patient, calm, waiting. It made uncomfortable in a way he could not explain. Name and designation, he demanded. She said, her voice was quiet, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. Transfer candidate, Section 7 protocol. Felt his antennae twitch. Section 7 was a classified program. It was used for special placements that came from the highest levels of Confederate command. But that was impossible. Section 7 was for important people, dangerous people, not for humans. Your previous combat experience, he asked. Sufficient. The word hung in the air. Laughed again, his 4 arms crossing over his massive chest. Sufficient for what, Terran? Herding animals on your planet, fighting with sticks and rocks. Turned her head just slightly, just enough to look at the prince. Their eyes met for perhaps 2 seconds. Something happened in that moment, saw it, Everyone saw it, even if they did not understand what they were seeing. The laughter died in his throat. His silver skin seemed to lose some of its shine. He took a small step backward without meaning to. His body had reacted to something his mind could not name. Some ancient instinct, buried deep in his predator brain, had suddenly woken up and whispered a warning. Then looked away, and the moment passed. Shook his head as if waking from a dream. He laughed again, but this time it sounded forced, hollow. The cadets around him joined in, but their hearts were not in it anymore. "Enough," said. His voice was sharper than he intended. "Fall in, cadet. We will soon see what sufficient means to a Terran." Walked to her place in the formation. Her footsteps made no sound. She moved like water flowing around stones. She took her position and stood at attention, her eyes forward, her face empty of expression. Returned to the front of the parade ground. He began his welcome speech, the same speech he had given for 40 years, but his mind was not on his words. His mind was on the human woman in the back row. He had seen warriors from every corner of the galaxy. He had trained killers and heroes and monsters. He knew how to read people. It was his job to see who would succeed and who would fail. When he looked at, he could not read anything. She was like a book written in a language he did not know. And somewhere deep in his ancient brain, in the part that had kept his ancestors alive on a hostile world millions of years ago, a small voice was speaking. It was telling him to be afraid. He ignored it. She was just a human, a primitive from a death world. She would wash out within a week, just like all the others who did not belong here. He was certain of it. He had never been more wrong about anything in his entire life. The first week of training was designed to break them. Had seen it happen 100 times. Cadets would arrive full of pride and confidence. They were the best of their worlds, the chosen ones, the future leaders of galactic armies. Then the training would begin and they would learn a terrible truth. Being the best on your meant nothing here. Here, everyone was the best. Here, only the truly exceptional would survive. The schedule was brutal. They woke before the sun rose and trained until long after it set. They learned to fight in zero gravity, floating in the darkness of space with nothing to hold onto. They practiced what to do when a ship lost its air, how to survive when the cold vacuum of space tried to pull the life from their bodies. They fought against computer enemies that were faster and smarter than any living being. One by one, the cadets began to fail. The heir to the crystal mines collapsed on the third day. The heat of the desert training ground was too much for his species. His body, designed for the cool caves of his, simply shut down. Medical teams carried him away, and he never came back. The twins made it to day 5. Then came the sensory deprivation test. They were placed in chambers of complete darkness and silence, with nothing to see or hear or feel. For species who relied on their sharp senses, it was torture. Both sisters emerged screaming, their minds broken by the emptiness. They left the academy that same night. The prince was strong. His species were apex predators, designed by evolution to hunt and kill. He passed every physical test with ease, but even he struggled. The training pushed him to the edge of his limits and sometimes beyond. By the end of the first week, 15 cadets had washed out. 15 of the galaxy's finest, sent home in shame. Passed every test. She did not pass with high scores. She was not the fastest or the strongest. When they measured her performance, she was merely adequate, average, unremarkable. The instructors noted her scores and forgot about her. But she never stopped. The desert march that killed the air finished it. Her face was red and covered in sweat, her breathing heavy, but she crossed the finish line. The zero-gravity combat test that left half the class vomiting completed it with steady hands. The sensory deprivation chamber that destroyed the twins walked out after 6 hours, calm and quiet, as if she had simply been taking a nap. "She is like a machine," one of the instructors said too. They were watching the training footage together, trying to understand what they were seeing. Look at her stress hormones. They barely change. Her heart rate stays almost the same whether she is resting or fighting. She is human, replied. Her is a death world. Perhaps her species is simply too primitive to understand when they should be afraid. The instructor nodded. It was a good explanation. It made sense. Humans were probably just too stupid to know they were in danger. But that theory died on day 8, during the combat practicals. The cadets gathered in the fighting arena, a great circle of sand surrounded by observation platforms. Here they would face each other in single combat. No weapons, no armor, just body against body, skill against skill. Had been waiting for this moment. He had not forgotten the way had looked at him on the first day. He had not forgotten how his body had betrayed him, how his instincts had told him to run from a creature half his size. The memory burned in his chest like poison. He needed to prove that he was not afraid. He needed to show everyone that humans were nothing. I challenge the Terran, he announced, stepping into the arena. The other cadets whispered excitedly. This would be good entertainment. They were legendary fighters. They had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could cut through metal. Their reflexes were 10 times faster than most species. Their strength was enough to tear a person in half. Walked into the arena without a word. As she entered, she rolled up her sleeves. The cadets closest to her fell silent. Then the silence spread outward like ripples in water until the entire arena was quiet. Her arms were covered in scars. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. They layered over each other like writing in some ancient language. Burned scars, knife scars, the round mark of what might have been a bullet wound, long thin lines that could have come from claws or blades, rough patches where the skin had been torn away and healed badly. These were not the scars of training accidents. These were the marks of real combat, years of it, decades of it. Did not take a fighting stance. She simply stood in the center of the arena, her arms loose at her sides, her weight balanced evenly on both feet. She looked at with those calm brown eyes and waited. The prince attacked. He was fast, incredibly fast. His 4 arms struck at once, claws extended, aiming for throat, chest, and stomach. It was an attack that no one should have been able to block. It was an attack that had killed 100 enemies before. Moved. What happened next would be talked about for years. The recording systems captured everything, but even watching it frame by frame, no one could quite understand what they saw. She shifted her weight just a little, perhaps 10 centimeters to the left. Her hands came up in a motion too fast to follow. There was a sound of impact, a crack of bone, a scream of pain. And then was on the ground. He lay on his back, gasping for air, his face twisted in agony. One of his 4 arms bent at an angle that arms should not bend. The medical team was already rushing toward him. Stood over him. She had not even moved from her original position. Her breathing was normal. Her expression had not changed. Yield, she said. It was not a question. Yielded. The arena was silent. Every cadet, every instructor, every observer stared at the small human woman with the rusted badge and the arms. They had all seen combat. They had all studied fighting techniques from across the galaxy. None of them had ever seen anything like that. Watched from the observation deck. His compound eyes could not blink, but if they could, he would have forgotten to do so. He pulled up file again on his. Transfer candidate. Section 7. Previous unit classified, previous deployment classified, rank classified. For the first time since she had arrived, began to understand. This was not a primitive from a death world. This was not a charity case or a mistake. This was something else entirely. And he had no idea what. Word spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. The Terran, the one with the rusted badge. Have you heard what she did to? Have you seen the scars on her arms? There is something wrong with her. There is something strange about the way she moves, the way she watches everything, the way she never seems to be surprised by anything. The cadets who had laughed at on the first day now fell silent when she walked past. They watched her from the corners of their eyes. They whispered to each other when she could not hear. Even, his arm wrapped in a healing cast, stopped making jokes about primitives and death worlds. The instructors noticed the change. They began watching more carefully during training. They reviewed her test scores again and again, looking for something they might have missed. But her scores were still just average. She was not the best at anything. She simply never failed. Seemed not to notice any of it. She ate alone in the mess hall. She sat at a small table in the corner, reading from an old while she chewed her food slowly. That was battered and scratched like it had been through a war. Maybe it had. She trained alone during the off hours. While other cadets rested or played games or talked with their friends, went to the simulation rooms. She ran programs that no one else could access. The doors would lock behind her and she would stay inside for hours. She spoke only when someone spoke to her first, and even then her answers were short. Yes, no, understood. She never used more words than she needed. She never explained herself. She never complained. But sometimes, late at night, the cadets in the rooms near hers would hear her talking. She was not screaming. Humans were known for their nightmares, for the bad dreams that their death world brains created to help them survive, but was not having nightmares. She was speaking, clearly, calmly, giving orders. One cadet pressed his ear to the wall and listened. He heard her speaking in the language of the four-armed predators. Then she switched to the clicking tongue of the insect people. Then to a language he did not recognize. Then to another. Then to another. The cadet counted 12 different languages before he became too frightened to listen anymore. Who was she? Where had she learned to speak so many tongues? Why would someone have nightmares about giving orders? No one had answers and was not talking. 3 weeks passed. The training continued. More cadets washed out, though fewer now than before. The ones who remained were the strongest, the most determined. They had earned the right to be there. Then everything changed. It was the middle of the night when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed in every hallway. Sirens wailed so loud they hurt the ears. Cadets stumbled out of their beds, confused and frightened. Instructors ran past them, their faces showing expressions of pure terror. His voice came over the communication system. He was trying to sound calm, but his words clicked together too fast. The way spoke when they were afraid. All cadets to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. All cadets to emergency shelters immediately. The academy is under attack. Under attack. But the academy was on one of the most protected worlds in the Confederacy. There were defense platforms in orbit. There were warships patrolling the system. Who would be stupid enough to attack here? Then someone looked out a window and saw the answer. The sky was full of black shapes. They fell through the atmosphere like rain, leaving trails of fire behind them. Landing pods, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And every cadet who had studied galactic history felt their blood turn to ice. The Hollow had come. The Hollow were the galaxy's oldest nightmare. No one knew where they came from. No one knew what they really wanted. They simply appeared at the edge of civilized space every few centuries and consumed everything in their path. They were made of silicon instead of carbon. They had no individual minds, only a hive consciousness that thought with a million bodies at once. They felt no fear, no pain, no mercy. The last time the Hollow had attacked, they had destroyed the entire empire. 50 billion people, gone in 1 year. Now they were here. Cadets ran for the emergency shelters. Instructors tried to organize the evacuation. But there was too much fear, too much confusion. People were screaming and pushing and falling over each other. Walked in the opposite direction. She moved through the chaos like a fish swimming upstream. Her face was calm. Her steps were steady. She walked toward the landing zones, toward the burning sky, toward the enemy. Saw her and shouted after her. "Cadet, the evacuation is this way. What are you doing?" Stopped and turned to face him. "I know," she said. Her voice was still quiet, still unhurried. "Get the cadets to the secondary bunkers. The primary shelters are too close to the landing zone. The hollow will hit those first." Stared at her. "How would you possibly know that?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time saw something in her eyes that made his entire body freeze. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something deeper, something older. It was the look of someone who had seen the end of the world before and had walked through it anyway. "Because I have fought them before," she said. Then she turned and continued walking toward the fire. Stood frozen for a long moment. Then he started screaming orders, directing cadets toward the secondary bunkers, away from the primary shelters. He did not know why he was listening to her. He did not understand how she could know what the hollow would do. But something in her voice had told him that she was right. And he believed her. The battle for Prime had begun. And at its center, walking alone toward an army of monsters, was a small human woman with a rusted bronze badge and eyes that had seen things no one should ever have to see. The battle for Prime lasted 11 hours. Later, when historians wrote about it, they would call it the miracle of. They would study the battle from every angle, trying to understand how it was possible. 300 hollow combat forms against an academy full of half-trained cadets and aging instructors. The odds said everyone should have died. The math said there should have been no survivors. But there was something the odds and the math did not know about. Her name was. The cadets who survived that night would tell stories for the rest of their lives. They would tell their children and their. They would tell anyone who would listen, and many who would not. They spoke of how the Terran woman appeared on the battlefield like a ghost. The hollow were everywhere, their silicon bodies clicking and screeching, their bladed limbs cutting through anything they touched. The academy's defenses were falling. The instructors were dying. Everything seemed lost. Then she was there. She moved through the hollow swarm like water flowing through rocks. She was never where they expected her to be. Their blades cut empty air. Their bodies crashed into each other as they tried to catch her, and wherever she went, hollow fell. She knew things about them that no one else knew. She aimed for joints that no one had ever thought to study. She used their own movements against them, turning their attacks into weaknesses. She exploited flaws in their hive mind that had never been documented in any database. The cadets saw her take down a hollow warrior 3 times her size with nothing but a broken piece of metal. They saw her lead a group of terrified young soldiers through an impossible crossfire, losing not a single one. They saw her stand alone at a doorway, holding back a wave of enemies while wounded cadets escaped behind her. She killed 62 of them that night. They counted later, matching the bodies to the wounds. 62. But the moment that would become legend happened near the end. The Hollow did not think like other beings. They had no generals or leaders in the normal sense, but each swarm had a center, a queen node that coordinated the hive mind. Kill the queen, and the swarm would become confused. The connection between bodies would break. The Hollow would stop being an army and become just a collection of individuals. The queen was hiding in the academy's main hall. Hundreds of Hollows surrounded it, protecting it with their bodies. Getting to the queen was suicide. Everyone knew it. Went anyway. She walked toward the main hall with steady steps. The cadets watching her thought she was going to die. Many of them cried. Some of them tried to follow her, but she ordered them back with a voice that allowed no argument. She entered the main hall alone. For 20 minutes there was nothing but screaming from inside. Inhuman screaming, the sound of silicon bodies breaking, the crash of walls collapsing. Then silence. The doors opened. walked out. She was covered in blood, not red blood but the gray-green fluid that flowed through hollow veins. It covered her face, her arms, her clothes. It dripped from her hair and ran down her boots and left a trail behind her wherever she stepped. In her hand, she carried the sensory cluster of the Hollow Queen. It was the size of a human head, covered in dead eyes and twitching antennae. She dropped it on the ground in front of the watching cadets. "Destroy the others," she said. Her voice was calm, like she had just finished a morning walk. "They will be confused now. They will not fight as a group. End it." Then she sat down on a piece of broken stone and began to clean her knife. The cadets destroyed the remaining hollow within the hour. When the Confederate reinforcement fleet arrived, they found something they had not expected. They had come prepared for a rescue mission. They had brought body bags and grief counselors. They had expected to find everyone dead. Instead, they found a victory. Admiral was the highest-ranking officer in the sector. She had commanded fleets in 3 major wars. She had medals that would fill a room. When her shuttle landed on the academy grounds, everyone expected her to speak with or one of the senior instructors. She walked past all of them. She walked straight to the small human woman sitting on a piece of rubble, still cleaning hollow blood from her knife. An admiral saluted. The salute froze everyone in place. Cadets stopped moving. Instructors stopped talking. Officers stopped breathing. An admiral did not salute cadets. An admiral did not salute anyone below the rank of general. "General," said. Her voice was clear and steady and filled with respect. The word spread through the crowd like electricity. "General." She called her general. Did not look up from her knife. "I am retired," she said. "With respect," General replied. "You do not get to be retired from what you are." Felt his legs go weak. His was buzzing. Classified files were being unlocked, flooding his screen with information that had been hidden until now. General, commander of the 1st Terran Expeditionary Force, the woman who had held the line for 17 months against a force that outnumbered her 50 to 1. 50 to 1. The mathematics of that battle were still studied in every military academy in the galaxy. She was the architect of the hollow containment strategy that had saved the entire Perseus arm 30 years ago. 11 star systems had been in the path of a hollow swarm. All of them were still alive today because of her. She was the only living being to have entered a hollow hive ship and emerged alive. Not once, not twice, 3 times. The rusted badge on her chest was not a mark of a primitive world. It was the original insignia of the first contact fleet, the first human ships to leave their solar system. There were only 7 of those badges left in existence. 6 of them were in museums. She had earned hers 60 years ago, when humanity made its first stand against a galaxy that thought they were nothing. Looked at the small woman with new eyes. He saw the gray hair and the lined face and understood now. 60 years of service, 60 years of war, 60 years of battles that would have broken anyone else. And she was still standing. She was still fighting. She was still winning. The rusted badge suddenly looked different to him. It was not a mark of shame. It was a mark of honor, the highest honor any soldier could earn. Time, survival, victory. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy with nothing but rusted metal and stubborn hearts. And they had proven themselves against every enemy the universe could throw at them. 3 days after the battle, the Academy held a memorial for the fallen. The ceremony took place at dawn, when the twin sons of Prime painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Rows of empty boots stood where cadets and instructors had once stood. 17 pairs in total. 17 lives lost in the defense of the Academy. It was a small number. Everyone knew it should have been much larger. Everyone knew who to thank for that. Stood at the back of the crowd, as she always did. She wore her simple gray uniform and her rusted bronze badge. She did not wear any of the medals that Admiral had tried to give her. She did not stand on the stage with the other heroes. She just stood in the back, quiet and still, and watched. But this time no one mocked her. This time when cadets looked at her, they did not see a primitive from a death world. They saw something else, something they did not have a word for. After the ceremony ended, people began to leave. They walked in small groups, talking quietly about the friends they had lost and the future that waited for them. The academy would rebuild, training would continue, life would go on. Did not leave with the others. He walked to the back of the crowd where stood. His movements were slow, careful, like a person approaching something holy. He stopped a respectful distance away and waited for her to notice him. She looked at him with those calm brown eyes. "Sergeant Major," she said. "General," he replied. The word felt strange on his mandibles. He had spent weeks treating her like dirt. He had laughed at her badge and questioned her abilities and assumed she was nothing. The shame of it burned in his chest like acid. "Why?" he asked. It was the question that had been eating at him since the Admiral's salute. You could have commanded any fleet in the Confederacy. You could have sat in the most comfortable office on the most protected world and given orders that would move armies. Why come here? Why come to a training academy and let us treat you the way we did? Was silent for a long moment. She looked out over the academy grounds. The white buildings were now marked by plasma burns and hollow acid. Broken stone and twisted metal littered the training fields. Cadets were already working to clear the debris, carrying pieces of the destruction to recycling centers. Was among them. His arm was still in a healing cast, but he was working anyway. And Cadet was helping him carry a heavy beam of metal. A student was directing them where to put it. 3 species, working together without argument. "Because I am old," said finally. Her voice was quiet, like wind through leaves. "I have fought in more battles than I can remember. I have watched friends die in every corner of this galaxy. I have given orders that sent thousands to their deaths, and I have killed so many enemies that their faces blur together in my memories." She touched the rusted badge on her chest. Her fingers were gentle, like she was touching the face of an old friend. "And somewhere along the way," she continued, "people stopped seeing humans as we really are. They saw our legends, our victories. They saw the soldiers who held the line and the commanders who stopped the hollow and the warriors who never seemed to lose. They forgot that we started as nothing." She turned to face. Her eyes held something he had never seen before. Sadness, maybe, or tiredness, or the weight of 60 years of carrying responsibilities that would have crushed anyone else. "These cadets needed to see that," she said. "They needed to see what we really are underneath the legends. They needed to see a human with a rusted badge, standing in the back row being mocked by everyone. They needed to watch that human pass every test and never complain. They needed to understand." "Understand what?" asked. Smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. It changed her face in a way that made her look younger somehow, like a glimpse of the person she had been before the wars took everything from her. "That we are survivors," she said, "just like everyone else. We get knocked down. We get mocked. We get written off as primitives from a poisonous rock in the back end of nowhere." She nodded toward the cadets working in the distance. "And the lifting debris together, rebuilding what had been destroyed. And then we get back up, every time. No matter how many times we fall, we get back up and we keep going. That is what it means to be human. That is what Earth taught us, not how to win, how to survive, how to endure, how to never ever stop." Was silent for a long moment. He thought about the training he had put the cadets through, the tests designed to break them, the challenges meant to find their limits. He had thought he was teaching them to be warriors. But maybe he had been wrong. Maybe the real lesson was not about being the strongest or the fastest or the best. Maybe the real lesson was about getting back up when you fell. Slowly, carefully, he bowed his head. It was the deepest gesture of respect his species could offer. It meant more than words. It meant that he saw her, that he understood her, that he honored everything she had sacrificed. "It has been my honor, General," he said. "It is just," she replied, "and the honor was mine, Sergeant Major." She walked away then, moving toward the temporary barracks where the surviving cadets were staying. The rusted bronze badge on her chest caught the light of the twin suns. It gleamed like something precious, like something valuable beyond measure. Behind her watched her go. He was not the only one watching. 42 surviving cadets had stopped their work to look at her. They came from a dozen different species. They wore badges made of crystal and silver and gold, representing civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. But when they looked at the small human woman with the rusted badge, they did not see a primitive. They did not see a charity case. They did not see someone beneath them. They saw a legend. And more than that, they saw a lesson. They had come to the academy thinking they were special because of where they came from. They had believed that their ancient bloodlines and advanced civilizations made them better than others. They had measured their worth by the shine of their badges and the power of their. Now they understood the truth. Worth was not something you were born with, it was something you earned, day by day, battle by battle, scar by scar. The human woman had walked into their academy with nothing but a rusted badge and the clothes on her back. She had let them mock her. She had let them look down on her. She had never once defended herself with words. Because she did not need to. Her actions spoke louder than any speech. Her survival was her argument. Her scars were her credentials. And when the darkness came, when the monsters arrived, when everyone else was running away, she had walked toward the fire. That was what it meant to be human. That was what Earth had forged in the crucible of its deadly world. Not the strongest soldiers, not the most advanced technology, not the most ancient wisdom. Just people who got back up every time, no matter what. The cadets returned to their work. They lifted the debris a little higher. They worked a little harder. They helped each other a little more. And they stood a little. Because now they knew the truth. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's rusted ships and primitive weapons. The older species had said that humans would never survive, that they were too young and too weak and too foolish to last. But the humans were still here. And they would always be here. Not because they were the best, but because they never stopped trying.